You know, we've talked about how to prepare yourself to go into the Holy Land and what to do on the way to the Holy Land and how to win the battle to get into the Holy Land. And we even saw last week how to recover from a bad choice. Well, this week, Joshua gives us a wonderful lesson on how to stay strong in our faith during the good times. You see, the Gibeonites deceived them. Now, you have to picture Canaan as a very unique kind of a place. It was an area that had several small cities that were surrounded by walls, and each of those was kind of, I guess you would call, a little kingdom. And the land surrounding the kingdom was always fought over by the neighboring kingdoms because that's where they grew their crops and fed their livestock and those kinds of things. So for hundreds of years, these little city-states had battled each other. And yet when they heard that the Israelites had come in and what God was doing for them, they all banded together to fight against the Israelites. It's amazing how the enemies of God unite when it's time to go against God. However, the people of Gibeon decided to do things a different way. They didn't want to fight against the Israelites because they saw what happened when you did. So they came up with a deceitful choice instead. Well, the interesting thing about this passage is I think it gives us a good outline for how to stay strong in our faith even during the good times. You see, when times are tough, we at least have something to pray for. I think a lot of times when times are good, we kind of get fat, dumb, and happy, and we kind of forget about God. Well, I think it's important that we don't do that. So here are some important things that we can learn. If we want to stay strong in our faith during the good times, first, we need to not rest on our laurels. We need to not just sit back and say, God's been so wonderful to me, let's just go on a cruise for a couple of months, we'll be back in a while. There are three things that we can do to help us not to rest on our laurels, because these things will happen to us when we're successful. You see, when you're successful, they come after you. And I'm not just talking about in your faith, or it's the same thing in life. When you are a successful business, the competition comes after you. When you are a successful person and have strong friendships and good relationships, they come after you. Even when you're a successful pastor, they come after you. I was a youth pastor at a Presbyterian church which shall remain nameless for a whole lot of years. And we had a very successful youth program. We had over 100 kids on any given Sunday night coming to our youth groups. Sometimes we had almost as many kids in the youth group as there were folks in worship on Sunday morning. It was very successful. And about 4 years or so into my tenure at this church, the head pastor retired. And because it wasn't a real large church, it was only about 250 members, they said, we can't really afford to keep you on, Keith, and hire an interim pastor. So in order to keep you on, we're going to have you be the interim pastor too. And I was young and stupid, so I said, okay. So I not only had to do everything I normally did, but I had to do all the stuff the pastor normally did too. And an amazing thing happened. The church grew like crazy. Our worship attendance on Sunday mornings nearly doubled. In fact, the largest Christmas Eve service in the history of the church was 450 folks. We had 775 people on Christmas Eve that year. Now, I don't know if it was because anything I was doing, but the community was growing like crazy, and so was the church. And when we hired the new pastor a year or so later, I stepped back into my normal role. There was a problem, however. The new pastor, he could teach really good, and he was a really good administrator, but the poor man could not preach a stitch. And about a year after he'd been there, a delegation from the session came into my office, and I thought, oh, I'm fired. And they said, no, you're not fired. We have a favor to ask of you. And I said, okay, what would you like me to do? They said, well, you know how you're preaching one Sunday a month and the pastor's preaching 3 Sundays a month? I said, yeah. They said, we'd like to swap that and have you preach 3 Sundays a month and have the regular pastor preach 1 Sunday a month. And after blinking a few times, I looked at them and I said, "Do you love me?" And they said, "Of course we love you." I said, "Don't ever tell the pastor that, ever, 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 because I'll be out of here quicker than you can believe." And they said, "Okay." And about a year later, they came back with the same request. I said, "You can't do that. I'll get fired." They listened to me that year. The third year they came back, they didn't listen to me. They went to the pastor and they said, "We'd like you guys to swap roles and we want Keith to preach more often." I was out of there within 6 months. You see, when you're successful, they come after you. Secondly, when you're winning, they don't fight fair. The people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, and so they resorted to a ruse. When you're successful and times are good, people don't fight fair with you. You see, evil doesn't always attack us like a lion. Sometimes it attacks us like a serpent. Doesn't always just come right in our face and knock us over. Sometimes it slithers in and bites us on the heel. When you're successful, they don't fight fair. When you're successful, they come after you. And when you're honorable, they take advantage of you. You see, the Gibeonites knew that if the Israelites made an oath to them in the name of the Lord their God, they couldn't go back on it. So they came up with this wonderful plan. They'd dress up like they'd been on a trip for months. They used old haggard mules, and they had torn old clothes, and their sandals all had holes in the bottoms of them. And they used old moldy bread, and their wineskins were ripped and repaired. And they took advantage of the honorable oath that the Israelites made with them. So we need to make sure that if we want to remain strong in our faith during the good times, we don't rest on our laurels. Secondly, we need to not lose our bearings. If we want to remain strong in our faith during the good times, we can't lose our bearings. It's too easy when times are good to kind of lose focus. You see what happened? Joshua and the leaders of Israel failed to seek God's guidance. Every other time they came upon a difficult situation, they would pray to God and ask what they should do, and God would give them an answer. But this time, they didn't seek God's guidance. They just looked at the situation and made a deal with these guys. It's important when times are good that we pray to God and seek His guidance. Secondly, they lost their bearings because they judged by appearances. They didn't do their homework. They didn't go to see where they were from. They didn't do their cultural research. And they got fooled by the appearances of these individuals. As a pastor, I am often visited during the week by individuals who have a very long, sad story. And if I had a buck for every buck I gave to somebody who didn't really need a buck, I'd have a lot of bucks. When I was in Pensacola, the churches were all along 9 Mile Road, and there was about 8 of them in a row. And there was a church right before us and one right after us. And anytime someone came to our church, I would always call the pastors of the church on this side and the church on this side to let them know they were coming. Because what they would do is they'd start on this end and they'd go all the way down. And if you got $20 from every church along the way, you could make quite a haul. Then we decided we'd give out gas cards instead of giving out money because they all were asking for gas. One day I was down at the gas station. There was some guy with about 5 of these gas cards trading them for cash. We can't just go by folks' appearance. Just because they look like they're in need doesn't necessarily mean that they are. Well, so how do we keep our faith strong during the good times? I think Joshua gives us 3 answers on how we can do that. We can learn from the mistakes that they made, and maybe use them for our success for the future, not just as individuals, but as a church. First, don't seek the easy solution. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Now, I'm changing that. If it sounds too good to be true, it always is. What Jericho could not do with walls and what Ai could not do with weapons, the Gibeonites accomplished with deceit. It was too good to be true. If we're seeking the easy solutions for our church for the future, we're going to fail. If we're trying to do things the easy way, let's just show up on Sunday morning, sing some pretty hymns, and have everybody smile and be happy, it ain't going to last for very long. We've got to do the hard work that it takes to make our church a successful place where folks can come and find God. It's the same with our lives. If we as individuals just want to be like that smiling cereal soaking up the milk all the time, we're never going to get anywhere in our faith. And when the difficult times come, we're going to have no answers to the questions that we're asking ourselves, and we're going to fall away. Easy solutions are easily destroyed. If you want to have a strong faith during the good times, don't seek the easy solutions. Secondly, don't let your commitments diminish your mission. Now, we're a pretty good-sized church. As far as Presbyterian churches go, we would be considered a large Presbyterian church. But we're not a megachurch. We don't have unlimited resources like these churches that have 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 or 20,000 people showing up on a Sunday morning. We need to make sure that the things that we decide to do with our church funds are good uses of the money. We need to make sure that the programs and things we plan for our people to do are successful so we don't wear our folks out. If we decide that we're going to compete with the Methodist church down the street and we're going to have a better youth ministry program or a better food program or whatever kind of program, that's not going to be successful because that might not be what God is calling us to do. You see, I believe through the study of the churches that I've looked at and worked for, the churches that are successful are the ones who figure out what God is calling them to do, and they do it. And they do that the best of anybody around. The problem is if we try to do too many things, we'll stretch ourselves too thin. We'll lose focus. Now, it would be wonderful if we could have the best youth ministry program in town. Problem is, we ain't got no kids. We could never compete with the Methodist Church. They got all kinds of kids. We could never compete with North Cliff Baptist Church or the Church of the Wildwood. They got kids coming out the walls. It would be silly for us to spend $100,000 a year to hire a youth pastor and to put together all the kinds of programs that would be needed to reach kids because we don't have any kids. Maybe someday we will. But right now, we need to focus on what God has called us to do. There's a lot of missions that we can do related to kids. We've discovered through the school system that there are 451 kids in our community who live either full or part-time in the woods around us. They're between the ages of 12 and 17, and they are homeless. They've either escaped a bad home situation or they've used drugs and been kicked out of their home or whatever, but they're living in the woods. Some of them are couch surfing and only living in the woods part-time. But that's a real need, and we need to figure out a way to help fill that. Now, can we house 451 kids? No. But there are some things we could do to help them. Each day they pack up their stuff and go to school. One of the things that our quilting group and our craft group are doing is they're making little backpacks for them so they can have something to put their stuff in when they go to school. Because if they leave it in the woods, when they come back, it's gone. You see, they go and they shower at school. So we're providing them with soap and shampoo and toothbrushes and toothpaste and those kinds of things to help them have at least some semblance of normalcy. Is that all we can do? I don't know. Maybe we can do more. But we got to at least do something. But if we decide, hey, we're going to find homes for all 451 of these kids, we're not going to be successful. Because some of them have very unique situations. Physical and mental illnesses, difficult pasts. If we overdo our commitments, then we'll diminish our mission. Same thing with you personally. If you're one of those kind of people who wants to just do everything, don't be a jack of all trades. Find one or two or three things that you're really good at, that you can serve the Lord in this place and in our community, and you focus on being the best at those things you can be. Because you'll not only be much more successful, but you'll be much more satisfied, and your relationship with God will grow that much more strong. Don't seek the easy solutions. Don't let your commitments diminish your mission. And third, don't let your guard down. Don't be fat, dumb, and happy during the good times, because that's when they come for you. Now, I realize that for some of us, it's very difficult to conceptualize evil in the form of a person, the devil or Satan or Lucifer or whatever you want to call that individual. For some of us, that's easy, but for others of us, it isn't. So if you don't believe that the devil's going to make you do it, you have to understand that there are evil forces out there that are trying to destroy your relationship with your God. And just when you think things are going the best, that's when they sneak in. I'll share a short story about my wife. She won't kill me, I don't think, for this one. If I'm not here next Sunday, you'll know why. See, there's a misconception that my wife has back problems. She doesn't have back problems. I'm the one with the back problems, but they got fixed by the same doctor who fixed my wife's chronic pain problems. You see, for a couple of decades, because of a work injury, she was in constant, excruciating pain and on all kinds of medications that really messed her up. And this doctor in Pensacola said, we'd like to try a spinal stimulator on you. And they take, and on the spinal cord, they put two little electrodes right on the spinal cord. And then they run a wire down your back and put a little battery in your tush, and that controls electronic waves that block the pain signals. And for the first time in a couple of decades, Tracy was pain-free. It was a miracle for us. And for the first time in a couple of decades, we had started talking about how she might go back to work and be a labor and delivery nurse again, which she absolutely loves. She's delivered over 300 babies because she works the night shift because she knows the doctors won't make it half the time. And almost to the day that we had a very serious conversation about her going back to work because she was feeling so good, we got in a car accident and she messed up her knee. We let our guard down. We need to be careful because when times seem like they're going really good, that's when bad things can happen. Now, we're hoping that within a few months, her knee's going to be well enough that she'll be able to go back to work and do what she enjoys most in life. You see, if we want to be successful, even in the good times, because when times are tough, it's easier to have a relationship with God because we're concerned and we pray and we really need God's help. But when times are good, we have a tendency to kind of rest on our laurels. We have a tendency to kind of lose focus. So if you're in one of those good times in your faith, and I think we're in a pretty good time as a church, we need to make sure we do three things. We need to make sure that we don't seek the easy solutions because they're never as they appear. Secondly, we need to make sure that we don't let our commitments get in the way of our mission. And third, especially during the good times, we need to make sure that we don't let our guard down. Because after the victory, that's when Satan begins the subtle attacks. And if we're not careful, like those Israelites, we'll be deceived.